A number of different free agents have already agreed to re-up with their teams. Already seen a trade today of Eric Howla and Pavel Zacha. There's a number of messages out right now from different teams. Mainly the San Jose Sharks right now have Brent Burns on the market. Seems like the Carolina Hurricanes may be closing in on a trade for him. Already had a couple of signings today. Malkin back to the Pittsburgh Penguins. You can see that video up on our site. Also, Evander Kane goes back to the Edmonton Oilers. Both of those moves were seemingly obvious from the outside looking in anyway. Malkin was always destined to go back to Pittsburgh. For Evander Kane, that was a little bit more of an unknown, at least in my opinion anyway. He was seeking a $7 million contract or annual anyway, and just was not able to find that on the free agent market. Took a little bit less, according to what he says anyway, to go back to Edmonton to be able to build a championship team there. They have Connor McDavid and look to be able to sign Jack Campbell as well. Looking at the rest of the free agent market, the top name on the board is going to be Johnny Gaudreau. Will he leave the Flames? Will he end up staying? Matthew Tkachuk is also a free agent there, so we'll see what ends up happening in Calgary. Jack Campbell, of course, is the only good goalie left on the market. He's pretty much agreed to sign with the Edmonton Oilers, waiting to see what the final terms end up being. Number of different backups are also agreeing to contracts quickly today. Ilya Samsonov has just agreed to a deal with Toronto anyway. So we'll see how many more free agents come off the board. It's coming in fast and furious as free agent frenzy is just about to get underway. Looks like Andrew Kopp of the formerly anyway of the Winnipeg Jets was traded to the Rangers at the deadline. Sounds like he is going to the Detroit Red Wings for somewhere in between $5 and $6 million. Sounds like it's going to be very similar to the Zach Hyman contract. That information coming from Elliot Friedman. Friedman also has the Eric Howla deal with Pavel Zacha going the other way. Connor Brown to Edmonton. Sounds like that trade is about to get done from the Ottawa Senators. Josh Manson agreed to a 4-year, $4.5 million deal with the Colorado Avalanche. So we've already seen a number of different transactions already take place. Josh Manson, of course, the defenseman for the Colorado Avalanche last year, won the Stanley Cup there and locks up the back end there for the Avs. Make sure you avoid fake Twitter accounts today for all the different news that's out there. For those of you who are Dallas Stars fans, it sounds like Mason Marchment might be going to the Stars. Of course, they were interested in bringing in Brent Burns with the Peter DeBoer connection. We'll see if they end up making anything like that happen. Multiple reports now indicating that Brent Burns and Carolina are very likely to get completed today anyway. John Klingberg getting some headlines early anyway. One of the top line offensive defensemen out there has been underpaid for a number of years. We'll see which team he ends up going to. He will be a man in demand as teams look to improve their back end. Just kind of scrolling through some of the other notifications we've got in the last few minutes. Jack Campbell is expected to go to Edmonton. That reporting coming from Elliot Friedman. Darcy Kemper, the goalie for the Colorado Avalanche, looks like he is going to Washington. A number of backups look like they are about to be on the move. The Blues are close to an agreement with Thomas Greiss, formerly of the New York Islanders anyway. The Seattle Kraken are in on Martin Jones. Seattle Kraken have been investing heavily from their inception in the goaltender market. And Martin Jones seems to be the most likely name going there next. So it looks like it'll be Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov in Toronto for your goalie tandem this year. They have Kallgren there for the long term, but we'll see how that ends up going. Josh Manson, as we mentioned, is staying in Colorado. That seems to be the move so far today. But let us know which team you'd like to see, which teams you're following today. Here at the Upside, we don't just follow the NHL, we follow MLB, NBA, and the NFL. So if you're a fan of any of those leagues, if you have a favorite team in those leagues, let us know what your team is, and we'll see if we can put out some content for you, keep you up to date on them. As we know, you all have jobs and can't exactly watch ESPN 24 hours a day, so we'll bring you as many of those headlines as we possibly can, and follow us on Twitter. Whenever we post a video, we'll let you know through Twitter, and you can click on the link and follow us to our YouTube page here. Malkin, the move that was completed by the Pens earlier this morning anyway, there was a little bit of acrimony around him over the last 24, 48 hours. Seemed like he was very unhappy with the way the Pittsburgh Penguin front office was handling him. Felt like he wasn't being appreciated for as long as he's been with Pittsburgh. He's been there for 15 years. And I guess he was expecting a little bit more consideration for that. And so he thought he was entitled to that 4-year deal. Think of Ryan Suter last year going to the Dallas Stars. He really wanted a 4-year deal, and a number of different teams out there were willing to give him 3 years. But even on a team where he hadn't had any history, he was able to get a 4th year. Very similar point in their career, Ryan Suter and Evgeny Malkin. Malkin, this contract will likely run him through the remainder of his career at 4 years and $24.4 million. For Evander Kane, as we mentioned, he was seeking a multi-million-dollar contract, close to $7 million, the one that got ripped to shreds by the San Jose Sharks. The Sharks, of course, voided that contract due to COVID protocol violations in the minors. You got to wonder if the off-ice concerns, of course, had led to the termination of that contract. He is, of course, protesting the termination of it, which made his free agency a little bit more interesting as what happens if that case is upheld and Evander Kane gets that contract reinstated. Does he still get to play for other teams, or does he have to go back to San Jose? That would have been very interesting. My guess is they probably will come to some type of resolution financially. But in the end, Evander Kane re-signs with the Edmonton Oilers on a 4-year, $20.5 million deal. Now, he says he gave the team room to be able to bring in other free agents and contend for championships. And while that may be true, I'm not sure that there was ever any argument that said that Evander Kane was going to get more than that, even from an outside club. Of course, the domestic violence allegations and the betting on hockey games allegations were something to keep an eye on, but those were never substantiated by the NHL, and that's why he was allowed to sign with the Oilers in the first place. He got 13 goals in 15 games of this postseason. He was absolutely fantastic. How many people can you name have scored 13 goals in 15 games in a playoff game, or in a playoff run anyway? One of the big names one of the teams that was going to be after John Klingberg is apparently going to be out of the running after the Carolina Hurricanes are going to acquire Brent Burns. It'll be interesting to see what the return ends up being, but it sounds like they are going to remove themselves from the John Klingberg sweepstakes. The Colorado Avalanche also locked up Josh Manson. He was a right-handed shot as well on their back end. So if Colorado did end up losing Josh Manson, they could have been a suitor for John Klingberg. The Avalanche are also going to be out of the running there. Sounds like that deal for Brent Burns is going to expand to extra players as well. So this might be a blockbuster. So keep your eyes peeled for the Brent Burns move. Brent Burns, of course, has his no-trade list, but it sounds like the Carolina Hurricanes are not on that list. So that's why Carolina makes a lot of sense here. Carolina's been very good over the past 2, 3, 4 years anyway, trying to get closer and closer to that Stanley Cup. If they get a guy like Brent Burns, they'd like to think that their chances of getting there and succeeding are much more likely. We'll see if that ends up happening. But if you're just joining us, Brent Burns looks like he is the surprise move of the day so far. My eyes are peeled for a Patrick Kane move at some point. It sounds like that the Chicago Blackhawks are headed towards a complete and total rebuild. I'm not sure if Patrick Kane is going to be willing to sit around for that. And so kind of keep your eyes peeled for that. A number of different teams are going to be interested in Patrick Kane, of course, if he ever is put on the market. I've yet to see any rumblings about that today, but I wonder if Brent Burns, once that deal gets done, if the market turns to a guy like Patrick Kane on the trade market, what do you think he would end up bringing? He, of course, is over 30 years old now. Of course, he's a little bit smaller of a player, but well, he's always been a very effective player in the NHL. Looks like there's confirming reports out there that there will be multiple players involved in the Carolina-San Jose trade, not just Brent Burns. As a fan of the Dallas Stars, I was kind of hoping he would be coming to Dallas, of course, but they have a lot of cap situations to worry about right now. Bringing back Jake Ottinger, going after or keeping Robert Bell. And of course, they have a hole on that Ben Sagan line. They bring in a right winger for that after Raffle looks like he's going to be headed internationally, and Alexander Radulov is already signed with the KHL team. Radulov was not nearly the player that he was at the beginning of the contract for the Stars. So they freed up a little bit of cap room by letting him go. The Dallas Stars did bring back Pavelski earlier this year on a $5.5 million deal, I believe. Great deal for Pavelski as it keeps him with the team he wants to be with, and the contract terms could not be better from a Dallas Stars perspective. You didn't have to shell out $7.5 million. I believe in this market, Pavelski could easily have commanded a salary just like that. But if you're just joining us, don't be afraid. Say hello. Appreciate you for joining us, Kent and James. You guys seem to pretty much be in every single one of my lives. Really appreciate it. And as to your question, are there any good goalies left? Not really. No good starters are really left on the market. Pretty much all of them have been scooped up. Even the good backups look like they've been scooped up now. So the trade market for goalies should really pick up probably around 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon is what I'm expecting. I expect some of these big names to kind of clog up the signing board, at least in the beginning. Johnny Gaudreau, a lot of money. We're going to have to head his way if he decides to leave Calgary. There's been interest from the Red Wings and Philadelphia Flyers in the past. We'll see if he ends up taking a big money deal to leave Calgary. Matthew Tkachuk, not exactly the offensive juggernaut that he once thought, or that everybody once thought he was going to be. More of a bruiser nowadays. Still has some skill down low, but he's also one of the big high-priced free agents for the Flames. The other big name out there from the Stanley Cup champions anyway is Nazem Kadri. He should command a hefty price tag as well. Looks like Josh Manson may have even taken a discount to sign with the Avalanche this year. That seems to be the reason why he was locked up so early on in this free agency period. Right-hand shot defensemen are always in demand. There are very few of them that are elite. Not that Josh Manson is elite, but he played that way in the postseason. Re-signing him at that number is a great get for the Avalanche. He is 30 years old. The deal has indeed been announced by the Avalanche. More news out of Dallas Stars camp. Mason Marchment is indeed going to be a Star. So for those of you from watching or that are watching from around the Texas area, keep in mind John Klingberg is probably the biggest free agent that you have out there, but your restricted free agents you got to keep an eye on. Jake Ottinger right now is the best goalie by far on the free agent market, but he is a restricted free agent. There was rumblings that Jake Ottinger would sign or would be interested in signing a offer sheet from another team. that may put pressure on the Stars to either allow him to accept that offer sheet and go to that other team, or take the compensation that would come back to them. But Ottinger kind of showed his value in the postseason, not just to the Dallas Stars, but to the rest of the league. But more importantly, the Stars need that kind of goaltending going forward. They haven't had that level of goaltending in a couple of years, even though they made that Stanley Cup run a couple of years ago in the bubble. Hudobin, who's still there, by the way, as the third goalie right now. He's a name to watch for on the trade market later on this afternoon, by the way. But Jake Ottinger is fully expected to come back to Dallas. I don't expect him to be moved or to even sign an offer sheet. I think it's more of just a threat by his camp. Victor Olofsson has just re-signed with the Buffalo Sabres, 2-year deal worth 4.75 AAV anyway. Looks like he was playing internationally last year, is coming back to Buffalo. Buffalo's got a lot of things going for it right now after finally getting rid of the Jack Eichel problem that they had. They just weren't able to come to terms on they weren't able to come to terms on the way his injury would have been handled. They were able to move him on to the Vegas Golden Knights, got a lot back in that trade, and their future looks very bright. Of course, it's always looked very bright with the draft capital they have. They've never really turned that into any postseason success. We'll see if the Sabres can finally do so. Bringing back Olofsson will certainly help in that regard anyway. They've freed up a number of salaries over the past 2 or 3 years, so we'll see if the Sabres can invest that money a little bit more wisely this time around. But so far, the big moves are getting Malkin back to the Pittsburgh Penguins, Evander Kane to the Oilers, the trade of Haula for Zacha, Josh Manson re-upping with Colorado, just waiting on the Brent Burns trade particulars anyway. It sounds like it's getting very close to being completed. Of course, you always have to wonder about medicals as well. That could be part of the delay, notifying players, that kind of thing, before it does indeed become official. Appreciate you guys joining us for NHL Free Agent Frenzy. Probably do an hour or so here, maybe a little bit less, we'll see, and then check in again later on this afternoon. See if we can touch on a number of different teams. A lot of different needs out there, a lot of free agent options to go. Just looking at the free agent big board anyway, Johnny Gaudreau is number one, the left winger from the Flames. He had a 6.75 cap hit last year. He is probably going to get in the neighborhood of $8 to $10 million. It sounds like the Flames just aren't willing to pay quite that high of a price. We'll see what ends up getting done there. Georgiev re-signed with the Avalanche earlier this offseason as well. Number two on our big board is Philip Forsberg. He has re-signed with the Nashville Predators as well. Matthew Tkachuk is out there. Number three on my board, though, is going to be Jason Robertson of the Stars. 40 goals last year, very young player. Can play left and right wing for you. I don't expect him to move, but he should command close to an $8 million salary. That's $7 million more than he was on last year. That's why the Stars need to save their cap room. Evgeny Malkin already taken off the board. He was going to be my number four. He goes back to the Pittsburgh Penguins at a little cheaper cap number this year. Instead of 9.5 like it was last year, it's going to be about a $6.1 million cap hit. Nazem Kadri is number 5 on my list anyway, from the Colorado Avalanche. Just the way he played in the postseason, the way he's always played anyway, even back to his time with the Maple Leafs. You don't really pay too much for a checking line center anyway, but just how effective he's been and able to score on those type of lines makes him my number 5. Number 6 is going to be Jake Ottinger. The only reason he's this low on this list is because I don't expect him to move. He is an RFA for the Stars, and I fully expect him to go back to the Dallas Stars. Number 7, Patrice Bergeron. I'm not sure if he'll end up coming back to the Bruins or if he's going to retire, if he goes international. We'll see what ends up happening there. He is a little bit older. Otherwise, he also would have been a little bit higher. Nichushkin also came off the board late last night anyway, 8 years on $49 million contract anyway to go back to the Colorado Avalanche. Avalanche spending a little bit of money to keep their team together. Claude Giroux was on an 8.25 cap hit this past season after his trade to the Florida Panthers. He is not expected back in Florida. He has had interest back from the Philadelphia Flyers, also had interest from a few Canadian teams, as well as the Detroit Red Wings. We'll see if he ends up going back to the Flyers. Andre Palat from the Lightning had a $5.3 million cap hit this past season. He's also in my top 10. Look for him to not go back to the Lightning as they don't really have much room to keep him there, but he could be a nice wing addition for a number of teams out there. Probably going to be around a $5 million cap hit again. Patrick Laine is an RFA this year. Had a decent year for the Blue Jackets after the trade, $7.5 million cap hit this past season. I don't expect it to be that high next season. John Klingberg rounds out my top 10 anyway. He's probably the best defenseman available right now, in my opinion anyway. Has a 4.25 cap hit last year for the Stars, is expecting a massive raise, was looking for something similar to the Miro Heiskanen contract in his negotiations with the Dallas Stars. We'll see if he ends up getting that. Two right-handed shots have already come off the board, at least seemingly, in Josh Manson going to Colorado, and Brent Burns trade looking very likely to get completed with the Carolina Hurricanes. So a couple of suitors there. More reports out of the St. Louis Blues that they are indeed bringing in Thomas Greiss to be their backup goalie. Spent the last 2 years in Detroit. Before that was with the Islanders. Before that, of course, was with the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll see if he can recapture some of that success. Evander Kane was signed already, so he is off the board. Jack Campbell is expected to go to the Edmonton Oilers. Otherwise, he would be higher on my board as well. Phil Kessel, getting up there in age, but is a still effective right winger anyway. Played for the Coyotes last year on an $8 million cap hit. Nowhere near that cap hit is going to be expected for him going forward. David Perron, also from the Blues, a very effective, versatile forward. Can play anywhere from your checking line to play next to your top line as well. Very good player to have that can play up and down that lineup. That kind of rounds out your top 20. Again, Johnny Gaudreau, the top free agent available. We'll see where he ends up going. He's expected to get somewhere close to a $10 million deal. Got to wonder other trades that may be in the works out there. A lot of goaltenders. Almost every team has locked up their top option anyway, so those who do not have a starting goaltender are going to have to scour that backup market, see if they can make something work for at least a year. Anton Khudobin, the third goalie for the Dallas Stars, we'll see if they can get rid of his contract, save $3 million, and put that towards a free agent forward. They do have 2 holes on the right wing. We'll see if they're able to fill those spots. The Calgary Flames, of course, have 2 of the top free agents on the market. We'll see if they're able to bring back both. If not, maybe they just keep Tkachuk. Gaudreau is, of course, going to command the highest dollar. Earlier this offseason, Chris Letang agreed to return to the Pittsburgh Penguins on a 6-year deal. Darcy Kemper, as we mentioned, is expected to sign with the Washington Capitals. Burakovsky is also a free agent at the moment. We'll see where he ends up going. Nick Leddy of the Blues. The Blues are said to want to bring him back. That's part of the reason why they're not looking to re-sign David Perron. They want to keep Nick Leddy. The Blues have had a lot of turnover on their back end over the last 5 years. No Pietrangelo back there. Lost Dunn in the expansion draft as well. Goodbranson is gone. Bouwmeester had to retire due to injury. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Wednesday morning. I know there's not a lot of you guys on YouTube early in the morning, as you guys are either sleeping in or, of course, working your 9 to 5. Sounds like some news out of the Palat camp is that indeed the Lightning have backed out of all negotiations with the forward. They do have, or Tampa Bay is focusing on long-term deals for their own RFAs, Sergachev, Cirelli, and Chernak. Sounds like they're going to try to lock those players up with long-term deals more than anything else. We saw them sign a massive deal for Nick Paul, as far as term anyway, 7 years at $3 million, I think is what he ended up getting. Look for similar type of deals for those players as they try to keep that Tampa core together. Some news out of Chicago. Sounds like the agent for Kane, Taves, and Seth Jones, all of them have the same agent anyway. All have no move clause, but they've all been watching what's happening with the Blackhawks roster. They're not necessarily in agreement with the direction the team is taking. They will let the dust settle first and then patiently make their best decisions for each player as it pertains to their respective careers. Sounds like all three players are unhappy with the direction of the team is going. It sounds like they're also going to give the team a chance to field a competitive roster. Of course, they took on the Peter Mrazek contract to get an extra pick. Kyle Davidson, the GM there for the Chicago Blackhawks, came under fire this past trade deadline season in his negotiations with Kyle Dubas. This is very interesting news. All three players, I was expecting maybe Patrick Kane to want out of there, but it sounds like Jonathan Taves, a longtime Chicago Blackhawk, may also end up wanting out of there if they're unable to get this thing turned around. Seth Jones, who was just brought in last year for a first-round pick, is under contract there. If he demands a trade, it'd be very interesting. NHL is a little bit different than other sports anyway. If they have a no-move clause, just like the NBA, they're more willing to listen to those trade demands. And for Patrick Kane, Jonathan Taves, and Seth Jones to all be unhappy with the direction of the Blackhawks roster, that tells you bad things are coming for the Blackhawks. I mean, they could get a hefty draft package back for each one of them, don't get me wrong, but they're draft picks. There's not an NHL player that's going to want to go to the Chicago Blackhawks in the event that those three players are traded. Patrick Kane, at the outset of free agency, I thought might have been one of the players interested in moving. We're already going to see a Brent Burns trade today. Will we see a Patrick Kane's deal? I think a move for Seth Jones might take a little bit longer, as he's going to command a little bit heftier of a package, being a little bit younger and a defenseman. Jonathan Taves is on the back nine of his career, good veteran leadership, maybe a team on the brink of championship contention or possibly pushing themselves over that line might get a deal done for Jonathan Taves if he were to ever hit the market. But that would certainly put a skewer through the hearts of Blackhawk fans everywhere. I know there's quite a few of you out there. Whenever y'all are on the road, I see a bunch of y'all in the stands. Even for games that the Blackhawks aren't even playing, y'all are wearing Blackhawk jerseys. Y'all travel very well. What do you guys think of Kane, Taves, and Jones, all unhappy with the direction the Blackhawks are taking? But it sounds like they're just not coming out yet and demanding a trade out in public. But it sounds like their agent might be discussing such things with the ownership group of the Blackhawks. Yikes. It does sound like the deal with Jack Campbell is indeed getting done. 5 years, $5 million with the Edmonton Oilers. It is official. Yep, $5 million. Sounds like after the Toronto Maple Leafs agreed to that deal for Matt Murray, it became a one-team competition anyway for Jack Campbell. And that's why it didn't get over that $5 million threshold. but the Jack Campbell deal does indeed get done. Giroux actually goes to Ottawa. Wow. 3-year deal, $6.5 million per. Free agent frenzy is officially underway. Ottawa getting some veteran leadership there. Of course, they offloaded the money of Matt Murray, used some of that cap space to bring in Giroux here. At a 6.5 number, that's a great deal for Ottawa. We'll see if he ends up getting a no move with it. But Claude Giroux goes to the Ottawa Senators. Jack Campbell, 5 years, $5 million to Edmonton. Both of those deals just announced officially anyway in the last few minutes. The news out of the Chicago Blackhawks, probably the biggest domino so far, is that all three of Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, and Seth Jones all have the same agent, and his agent just came out and said that they are unhappy with the direction of the roster. They're going to give the Blackhawks time to correct the ship, but if decisions aren't made in the best interests of those three players, they probably will seek other opportunities. Obviously, that means a trade. That's very interesting reporting. That coming from Pierre LeBrun. Absolutely fantastic news if you're a team outside of Chicago. If you're a Blackhawk fans, sorry, it looks like you're going to be struggling for the next several years if all three of those players demand a trade. Giroux going to the Ottawa Senators, though, a little bit of a surprise. More reports coming out that Jack Campbell is officially an Oiler. Elliot Friedman announcing everybody cleared waivers from yesterday, so they will all be free agents. Free agent class really taking shape now. Radulov getting congratulations from the Dallas Stars after he took a deal to go to the KHL anyway. Andre Palat not going back to Tampa Bay while the Lightning are looking to extend their own RFA. Sounds like they're going to be offering 8-year terms to Zergachev, Shirelli, and Chernak. I mean, they're a very good team. They've been in, they got a couple of titles out of it. They were right back there again this year, but they're willing to really go that length of term for those three players. Sounds like they might be getting discounts to be able to sign all three as Tampa looks to lock up their core and keep it together. I mean, I get it. You want to keep your championship team intact, but you really got to wonder about years 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 of those deals. But you guys let us know. What do you think that the deal should be? Or what do you think that the Blackhawks should end up doing with Toews, Kane, and Seth Jones? Just a year ago, they acquired Seth Jones. And, of course, things have not gone well. Ugh. Just absolutely horrible news for Blackhawks fans. I think a trade for Kane is probably the most likely. I think he was already being whispered about as being available, as he might want out. Samsonov's deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs, 1 year, $1.8 million, so it's definitely going to be more of a backup contract there, as the Toronto Maple Leafs have reshaped their entire goalie tandem. Last year having Campbell and Mrazek. This year they'll have Matt Murray and Samsonov, with Kallgren waiting in the wings. Looks like they're going the cheap route, at least for the next couple of years, while they have those high-priced contracts on their roster right now. That free agent contract that they signed with John Tavares, of course, impacting decisions later on. John Tavares is, of course, a fantastic player, but signing him to that length of deal at that high of an AAV is going to have an impact on your roster. And that's part of the reason Jack Campbell is now an Edmonton Oiler. More news again indicating Claude Giroux has indeed agreed to that deal. 3 years, 6.5 AAV to go to Ottawa. But again, for those of you just joining us, the big news, at least for me, Brent Burns going to the Carolina Hurricanes. It sounds like it's not going to be a draft pick type trade. Sounds like there's going to be several players involved. We'll see what ends up coming to fruition there. Sounds like they may be exchanging medicals and that kind of thing before they really get the names out there to the media. But the big news, of course, coming from the Blackhawks is that all three of the top players for the Blackhawks may indeed want out after the move for DeBrincat sent him to Ottawa. Ottawa really reshaping their roster this year. If you're an Ottawa Senators fan, you got to be happy with the direction your team is taking. Blackhawks fans, not so much. How often can you say that, where Ottawa Senators fans are happier with the direction of their team than the Chicago Blackhawks? That might be the first time I've ever said it. We'll see how the dust settles after this one. Usually after you have some big moves, the dust settles for about 30 minutes, and then you have another flurry of moves as the market kind of resets itself based on contracts that are signed, that kind of thing. Samsonov's $1.8 million deal with Toronto is definitely backup money. I'm not sure if that's the best way that they could have gone at the backup position either, but at a 1.8 AAV, that's right about in line with the financial terms that they were going to have to go with at that backup goaltender position, as their cap space is very tight. But thank you guys for joining us on NHL Free Agent Frenzy. A lot of moves already made, a lot of moves yet to be made. As I mentioned, the top of the market is going to be Johnny Gaudreau, left winger for the Flames, a 6.75 cap hit last year. He's expected to be close to that $10 million cap hit once his deal comes in. Just a few teams in on the mix for him. Calgary Flames looking to keep both Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk. Evgeny Malkin agreed to his deal with the Penguins earlier, 4 years at 6.1 AAV. Justin Schultz agrees to a deal with the Seattle Kraken, 2 years, $3 million-ish, it sounds like. Good defenseman there for the Kraken. Ilya Mikheyev goes to the Anaheim Ducks. Sounds like their deal might be getting close. Jason Robertson, of course, is my number 3 on the board anyway. He played for the Dallas Stars last year, had 40 goals last year, played absolutely fantastic. Nazem Kadri is in my top 5. He played for the Avs. And ever since he was with the Maple Leafs anyway, he was always more of a checking line guy, but he was still able to score and be an effective offensive player, even in a checking role. And so I expect him to get a nice, healthy raise, good, lengthy contract anyway. He had a 4.5 cap hit, probably going to get something in the $6, maybe $7 million range. Darcy Kemper goes to the Washington Capitals. Jake Ottinger is the RFA from the Stars, the goaltender, on the verge of stardom, if not already a star, honestly, after how good he played in that postseason series against the Flames and against Johnny Gaudreau. Held them without a goal for almost 180 minutes. 115 minutes, somewhere in there. He was absolutely fantastic. And he looks like he's ready for the limelight. He's going to get a nice raise from his $925,000 salary last year, probably going to be in the range of $5, maybe $6 million. The interesting part will be how long the term will be, how far the Stars want to go out. I'd imagine if they are able to get the full 8 years in term, maybe they're able to get a little bit lower AAV, which for a goalie of his caliber, if he continues on this course, is an absolute steal. When you look at other goaltenders out there at the top of their game, Carey Price over $10 million, Jonathan Quick, high price contract as well. the contracts that have been signed by Bobrovsky in the past. Columbus Blue Jackets announcing they've signed their first-round picks to 3-year entry-level deals. More confirmation that Samsonov has indeed agreed to the 1-year, $1.8 million backup goalie there. Who knows? Maybe he's probably your starter by midseason if Matt Murray is unable to continue to improve based off of his performance from last year. Murray is under contract for 2 years, though. But if you're just joining us, Brent Burns to the Carolina Hurricanes appears to be close to being done. It is going to be a multiplayer trade. And of course, the news out of the Blackhawks is that Kane, Taves, and Jones are all unhappy with the direction of the Blackhawks and that they are watching the situation closely. They want to see improvements to the team, not for the future, but for this year. The Chicago Blackhawks are right now all about improving for the future, though. So that may end up leading to trade requests from all 3 of their best players. Patrick Kane was the only one originally expected to demand a trade at some point, or at least ask for a trade. But it seems like the trade requests might come a little bit sooner than we would have thought. Once Brent Burns' trade finally gets done, we could probably see the trade chatter tick up anyway around a guy like Patrick Kane at a 10.5 AAV. That's a very high contract. Probably going to have to take on some salary in order to get some good picks back anyway if you're a Blackhawks fan. As good as those players are, they are older. Seth Jones is the only one that might be able to demand top dollar in a trade. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But thank you guys for joining us. Appreciate you guys joining us for NHL Free Agent Frenzy. We'll be back here in probably about around the 1 o'clock hour. So thank you guys for joining us. If you haven't already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Follow us on Twitter. We'll try to post a few of the videos for the signings that have already happened here in the next 20, 30 minutes. And let all y'all catch up with those. But thank you guys for joining us. And we'll see you a little bit later on this afternoon.